Hi there, viewers. Today, I'm joining in conversation with Makonnen Sankofa, the author of Life in Gambia, The Smiling Coast of Africa, and he's also the author of The Rise of Rastafari, Resistance, Redemption, and Repatriation. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Makonnen on the show. Hi there, Makonnen Sankofa.
Yes, I'm here from the beautiful smiling coast of Africa known as the Gambia. Thanks for having me on your show, Peter.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. Oh, Makonnen, tell us about Pan-Africanism and the sort of connection that Pan-Africanism have with your books, The Rise of Rastafari and maybe Life in Gambia.
Okay, so let's start with Pan-Africanism connection to Rastafari book. And I want to tell you what Pan-Africanism is, because Pan-Africanism is abroad and people's perspective of what they call Pan-Africanism can differ. But I define Pan-Africanism as people of African heritage, for example, putting their differences aside for the empowerment of people of African heritage. And that could be, politically, spiritually, culturally, socially, in various different ways. But, it's about people of African heritage uniting for the empowerment and advancement of our people. And that's why it's quite broad, because that can lead to then many different things. The reason why Pan-Africanism links into Rastafari, because Rastafari is a form of Pan-Africanism. You don't have to be a Pan-Africanist to be a Rastafari, but to be a Rastafari, you have to be a Pan-Africanist. Yeah, because the movement stems from that ideology of, people of African heritage advancing. And, the concept of Pan-Africanism, a lot of it does come from the diaspora, because obviously during, slavery, or even to this day in the Western world, when, you're put in the same kind of bracket, like in terms of, as long as you're black or your person of color, you're shifted into that bracket. Whereas we know the continent is different. It's like a man in Gambia doesn't necessarily know about East Africa, or it's more tribal. Yeah, and so what I'm saying is Pan-Africanism is the importance, because of basically a lot of people in the diaspora being put into that kind of bracket, and a lot of when enslaved Africans were taken, they weren't taken they were taken from different countries and put on ships, for example. And even in the diaspora, you have, say in England, you have people from Ghana, people from Nigeria, you have people from all over Africa. It's not just one part of Africa, but then you're still treated in a certain way by the society in general and put in a bracket. You're not Caribbean, not African. You're just then seen, particularly to the general, the white racist society, it's just, oh, you're black, and you're put in that kind of bracket. So it's something that basically saying that we're being discriminated, or we have been oppressed because of not because we're Gambian, not because we're Ghana before these countries even exist, not because the fact is that when you're looking at the way that we've been discriminated, because we're people of African Caribbean, because of our complexion, whether it's light brown to dark black, basically we've just been put in one category of black. Not you're Nigerian, not you're this part of Africa, you're that part of the Caribbean. And the common struggles of the descendants of enslaved Africans in the Caribbean and in the Western world, but then also on the continent as well. And the reason we've been basically it's happened a lot because of the race, because of the skin complexion. So to say that we need to put those differences aside, because we are different. Not all black people, we come in different complexions, we come in different tribes, we come in different cultures. We're not all one black people, we're all the same like that. But the fact is that we have got an experience, we have been, targeted because of, having a certain skin color, being of a certain ethnicity. So the need for us to then come together for our people, and particularly for Africa, but it could be in the West, but I'm saying concentrate on Africa to really, progress and advance. When certainly you see the way that Africa has been colonized and split up into different countries, etc. And without going too far away now, going back into Rastafari and the significance of Pan-Africanism to Rastafari, is that the ideals in Rastafari are heavily based. The teachings, a lot of Rastafari comes from Garveyism, which Garveyism teachings are based on Pan-Africanism. Leonard Howe was very much about Pan-Africanism, and so were the people core to the inception of the movement. So Pan-Africanism is at the core, and because we didn't know what part of Africa we come from, we just look at the whole of Africa as one. So when you look at Rastafari, you have like Haile Selassie, at the center part of the movement. He's an emperor in Ethiopia. You have a group like the Bobo Shanti, which is one of the groups of Rastafari. Now, many of the Shanti people were taken. The Shanti is a subgroup of the Akan people from Ghana, and a lot of the Akan people were taken to Jamaica during slavery. Some of them were marooned. Some of the people that resisted slavery, but many of them were taken to the Caribbean, Jamaica. And that's a connection, you know, that Ashanti and Akan people have with Jamaica. And this is why you have even some of the names like Nani, Akum, Achumpong, and these kind of names. These are Coromantee, what they call Caramanti. These are Ashanti, Akan names. So there's a connection there. So what the Bobo Shanti did was call a group, you know, the Bobo Shanti. They believe that they're part of the lost Ashanti from Jamaica. You have the Nyabingi, which is another Rastafari group. Nyabingi is an order in Uganda, Rwanda, that resist a movement that rise up to resist colonialism. And at the head of Nyabingi is a queen called Queen Mahanusa, also known as Queen Nyabingi, who was a warrior queen. So that Rastafari group was named Nyabingi after Empress Nyabingi from Uganda, Rwanda. You have, you know, the drumming, you know, the African, the drumming, and as well. So these are some things of, you know, how different elements of Africa have influenced, you know, the Rastafari movement. In terms of Gambia now, we have my second book,
okay,
which is Life in Gambia, the Smiling Coast of Africa. So this is effectively, you know, my experience of being on the continent. But in terms of Pan-Africanism, when I was in Gambia, I did meet certain individuals that I had conversations with, that I mentioned in my book, that also shared, you know, a Pan-African outlook and a Pan-African mindset. I think the reality, though, on the continent, just like I mentioned earlier, for example, is not everyone, though, in the Gambia, because sometimes people in Gambia, they don't know what other countries are in other parts of Africa. So they're looking more in towards, you know, Gambia, or even their tribe, like the Wolof, the Mandinka. So that's something that I noticed and I had to deal with, you know, slightly different. And then I've become more aware of that as I've got more experience on the continent, for example. And that's why I said this Pan-Africanism idea is really something that even I'm Pan-Africans that emerged really on the diaspora. Like even like some of the Pan-African leaders, like you say, like Nkrumah, he had to go to, you know, London or whatever, then find out about Pan-Africanism and come back onto the continent. Yeah, Garvey, it has influenced Africa as a whole. The flag of Malawi is based on Marcus Garvey's colors. So, for example, it's really more about an ideology from the diaspora. So, not everyone on the continent quite gets the idea of, you know, Pan-Africanism for those various different reasons. But, you know, for me, you know what, I said, I see all Africa as home. So as a Pan-Africanist, so for me, even though my parents are not necessarily from Gambia, but I think, you know, getting the experience of Africa has certainly broadened my horizons on certain things.
Wow, that's great. I love your deep and extensive, you know, answer to that question. And this will make me to ask you the last question that I got in this section, Makonnen Sankofa, on Rastafari and Pan-Africanism. Now, could you tell us about Marcus Garvey and its link with the Rastafarians?
Yeah, so Marcus Garvey had an organization called the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. Oh. And that organization had millions of Black people from all over the world, yeah, in different parts of the world, some in the Caribbean, some in the United States, the other parts of the Americas, England. It still exists to this day. It's not as powerful as it used to be, but the UNIA still exists. And they had, you know, hotels, steam laundry shops, restaurants, businesses. And Garvey was a Pan-Africanist activist. That's what he's known of. It was the largest race-first movement, and probably arguably the most significant, you know, African leader in the diaspora in the 20th century, in the 19th 20th century, yeah. Wow. And the reason why he's significant to Rastafari, because a lot of his teachings of, you know what, race first, of Black unity, self-determination, nation building, which is, you know, the main, these are the main things, quintessential Garveyism, and then Black people looking at divinity within ourselves, These are very much in line with the teachings of Rasta. All of the early founders of, the early founders of Rastafari and followers, they were Garveyites. They were, coming from Marcus Garvey's organization. And Len Howell, I said, it was a close friend of Marcus Garvey. There was a time where Garvey, he was advocating, the importance and the need, for Black people to look at spirituality from an African, from a Black perspective. He was saying that, in fact, there's actually, let me find the quote, because there's actually a couple of quotes in my book from Marcus Garvey that I've referred to. So just bear with me.
I think that should be starting from page 21. That's where you talked about post-slavery and Garvey.
Yeah, so Garvey, he taught that Black people should view God in their own image. And in page 24 of the Rise of Rastafari, it's the original edition of the Rise of Rastafari I'm looking at now.
Oh.
On page 24, I've used a reference of page 44 of the book, The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey stated, if the white man has the idea of a white God, let him worship his God as he desires. If the yellow man's God is of his race, let him worship his God as he sees fit. We as Negroes have found a new ideal. Whilst our God has no color, yet it is human to see everything through one's own spectacles. And since the white men have seen their God through white spectacles, we have only now started out, late though it be, to see our God through our own spectacles. The God of Isaac, the race that believe in the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. We Negroes believe in the God of Ethiopia, the everlasting God, the one God we believe, but we shall worship him through the spectacles of Ethiopia. Yeah. So the need of Black people had seen the image of God, and 184 of the selected writings and speeches of Marcus Garvey. There is a reprint of an article, Marcus Garvey, which was originally published in the Negro World newspaper in 1925. And in the article, Garvey said, the time has come for the Negro to forget and cast behind him his hero worship, to start immediately to create and emulate heroes of his saints, create our own martyrs, and elevate positions of fame and honor Black men and women who have made their distinct contributions to our racial history. So this, along with other statements that Marcus Garvey, now some people question whether Garvey said this or not, but there was a speech, it's claimed in 1927, that Marcus Garvey uttered, looked at Africa for the crowning of a Black king, he shall be a redeemer. Now, Reverend Maurice Webb is someone, a reverend who's I believe there's an article or he stated in a speech, people reiterated that and later on said it, or whether it's debatable whether or not he said that, Marcus Garvey. Even if he did say that, Reverend Webb stated that before that, but again, he's reiterating the need for Black people to look within ourselves. But what he did do, Marcus Garvey, there was a play in Jamaica in 1930, and in that play there was a coronation of an African king, and in that play in 1930, there was words to the effect of, look to Africa for the crowning of a Black king, he shall be the redeemer, something along those lines. And those words were stated in that play. And now shortly after that, in 1930, in November the 2nd, 1930, His Imperial Majesty became the king, the emperor. So he was king previously, but he became the emperor of Ethiopia. So this is the kind of significance to Garvey to the Rastafari movement. He's seen by many as a prophet in the Rastafari movement, who brought forth the revelation. Even though he was a Christian, he wasn't a Rastafarian, but he understood the need for Black people to see an image of divinity within himself.
Wow, that's fantastic. I so much appreciate your deep and extensive answers to this question. And I think I would love to take a break on Makonnen Sankofa, on Rastafari and Pan-Africanism. We'll catch you up later. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.